Today's topic is a report to our community about the pre-symposium, the Extension Pre-Symposium from the November AFCPE Symposium. And part of what we did was have roundtable discussions about critical issues facing Extension educators who work in the family resource management, personal finance area. And some of you may remember that we identified those topics with a survey, and we're here to report back to you today about the discussion in those issues around the topics, what resources we have, what resources we need, and what Extension can be doing to address those important issues in personal finance education. And leading this presentation today is Carrie Johnson. She's Extension Specialist and Associate Professor in Human Development and Family Science at North Dakota State University. Carrie was the chairman of our planning committee for the Extension Pre-Symposium meeting this year and last year. So we're really happy to have her and a few members of that planning committee team who are going to present those results to you today. So thanks, Carrie.
As Laura said, I led the planning committee for the AFCPE pre-symposium this year, and we decided to take a little different approach. Instead of bringing in a lot of speakers, we decided we would do some roundtable discussions. The previous year we had done some really short ones, and this year we decided we'd take a look and do a little more in-depth. So we did have 2 rounds of 1-hour discussions for our participants. And on the screen, you'll be able to see the topics that we discussed. So the farm ranch financial stress, healthcare costs, the health and wealth connection, transitioning to retirement, and affordable housing or cost of living. And then we also had some topics that were more internal versus external issues that we deal with in our topic area and in our careers. So we wanted to really look at long-term impacts and evaluation of our extension programming, how to work with volunteers, and also finding and engaging new audiences. So we're going to present information on each of these topics as to why participants at the pre-symposium thought these were critical issues. We're also going to present resources that we already have related to these topics, and then what next steps can we take as a work group, or should we continue working on these issues on a larger scale and not just in our own states. So I'm going to turn this over to Maria. Maria was also on our planning committee and led some of the roundtable discussions. And Maria and I will kind of be going back and forth with presenting today.
Thanks, Carrie. So our first topic that we're going to share today is the farm/ranch financial stress. And as Carrie said, we kind of started out by discussing why is this a critical issue. And you can see here are some of the things that came up. Certainly the notion of physical and mental well-being of farmers and their families and their workers is one of the major concerns. Sort of the vitality and the longevity of the farm operation itself, right? Because if you don't have mentally and physically well people working the farm's not going to really exist later on. So those two are pretty tied together. Certainly family finances are impacted, and so whether it's the financial stress of the farm, you know, then sort of putting extra needs on the family finances to help support the farm. You know, that is one of the things that can happen when farm income drops. It can also mean covering health insurance, which we know can be very expensive, out of the family finance budget versus the farm budget, those kinds of things. So there's lots of implications that cross there. How we reach people, and you know, and finding ways to engage youth, right? And figuring out how to connect it to the community, right? If we lose farms, people aren't going to be able to eat. So what's some resources that are out there that are being used across the country? The mental health first aid training is available. The financial content, some of the financial content in programs that are focusing on Beginning Farmer or the Annie's Project. So some of those ag programs out there that are targeting either new or existing farmers are trying to integrate in the idea of how to manage farm financial stress and other stressors, right? There's the stress management program out of Michigan State University. One's called Weathering the Storm. That is for farmers themselves. And then the second one they have is communicating with farmers and others about stress. And that is really designed for the professionals who are working with farmers. We have a gentleman, Mark Schur, who is offering stress management classes online. And we have a farm and farm family risk and resilience guide and toolkit, which really looks at an integrated approach to addressing farm stress and well-being over time. Some next steps that this team kind of talked about was, wouldn't it be great if there was some sort of farm family financial management curriculum, either online or face-to-face? And we kind of started brainstorming about what resources might be out there or how they might be adapted for this audience. There are some self-assessments out there on financial stress. Barbara O'Neill has a few posted on the Rutgers website. There may be some SARE or risk management regional center grant dollars that could help us in support of these resources. Certainly there could be some additional in-service regarding the risk management and resilience framework. That's something that myself and Bonnie Braun worked on. And then there's certainly some estate planning resources for farm audiences. So that's the farm and ranch stress topic. The next topic was healthcare costs. And this group came up with the idea of, critical issues being the cost, understanding the choices, and, what other resources are out there for people. And so what is already out there, the Health Insurance Literacy Initiative that comes out of the University of Maryland and the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension. I'm a part of that team. Feel free to reach out to me about that. But there is some educational resources for consumers understanding how to choose health insurance and how to use health insurance. Certainly there are other organizations like Assisters and Navigators that are in each state. The healthcare.gov and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation all have really great resources. I'm going to add, just because I've been there recently, the medicare.gov website is also great for those people 65 and older. Next steps is really to continue to provide information and resources to the communities, try to encourage individuals to enroll in health insurance, encouraging use of health insurance, and teaching people to navigate and negotiate their medical bills. The next group was the Health and Wealth Connection, and this group talked really about the link between the two. And so some of the things that they came up with about why this is such a critical issue is that whole notion of the financial and human costs of poor health, right? And sort of that cycle of, if you're not feeling well and you don't go to work, then you're not making money, and then you can't feel better because you can't go to the doctor. So it's that kind of connection. And then of course the opposite cycle can happen too. The notion that there are lower living standards in the US, especially for youth in many parts of this country. The whole notion that really a secondary issue is stress, right? And friends and family and community relationships can be impacted by the stress that is faced by diminished financial well-being. There's mental health issues, and then food deserts, right? And not being able to access food. So what resources do we already have in place? There are some resources out of Maryland and Minnesota on drug recovery and opioid related courses that can get us up to speed. There's the Small Steps to Health and Wealth program out of Rutgers. Healthy Sense, which is a SNAP Ed program. Cancer Finances program, which comes out of the University of Florida. Caregiver Finances, this is coming out of Iowa State University. Asset Funders Network, they have some research that we can access, and then local food efforts regarding gardens and CSAs. There was a thought about trying to have a national cohort to teach the Small Steps in Health and Wealth curriculum and kind of push out that curriculum in a way that's more collective in impact. And then sharing that impact, which is bullet number 2. Another thought was kind of showing how personal finance is connected to health. I know I've had some subsequent conversations with folks, and one thought was to take that ECOP model of health and list out in each of the different areas where personal finance kind of fits in, whether it's health insurance, whether it's mental health, whether it's working with youth. How does personal finance fit into that model? And then the last was empowering learners to be more respectful of their reality. Kind of no money shaming was the language that was used there.
So the next topic I'm going to discuss is transitioning to retirement. This group really talked about different aspects of retirement. So the emotional issues, and not just the labor issue or thinking about not working anymore or the financial issue, but really when you're transitioning to retirement, it is a big a big life event. And then what is a life of fulfillment? That was another issue that they discussed, along with retirement planning is often put on the back burner during younger years because of things like housing, cars, education, whether that's your education, your child's education. So really not planning for retirement early enough. And retirement is coming even if you don't plan for it to come, whether that be based on you just can't work anymore or choose not to work anymore. There are healthcare and health concerns during retirement. As we know, as we age, we do spend more money on healthcare and health costs. Another critical issue is downsizing. So when is it appropriate? How do you do it? Those are things that people may or may not think about. And then Social Security. Of course, Social Security alone isn't a comfortable lifestyle, but really what is that impact of claiming that early? Some individuals don't realize how much of an impact it has over one's life. They might think it's just $100 here or there every month, but really how that affects overall retirement. So what resources do we already have? SSA has some slides that can be downloaded and used. North Dakota, we have a curriculum called Design Your Succession Plan. This is really for farmers and ranchers, and we also have one for small business owners. And we do look at what that older generation is going to do in retirement. So we don't focus just on the financial part of that. FINRA has some calculators that can be used to determine how much is needed in retirement. Purdue has their planning for a secure retirement, and then how to get an A in retirement from Cynthia Crawford in Missouri. There are some gaps, getting people to take action. How do we actually get them from education to behavior change? Well-being aspect beyond financial of retirement, and then balancing multiple goals at once versus the baby step approach. So what is the best approach to help people transition to retirement? This group did not get to the conversation of next steps. So I have a nice little question mark here that maybe it's a discussion we have here today, or something that we can talk about after a while. The group I led while I was at the pre-symposium was affordable housing, cost of living. This topic, we're kind of all across the board when discussing. So some critical issues related to affordable housing and cost of living, of course, are prices. People being priced out of the market because of low wages. There are credit restrictions to home ownership. Sometimes for when we look at rental or even home purchasing, there is a limited amount of inventory on the market. So really, especially in rural areas. And a few of our team members also discussed reentry, so prison population or coming out of treatment, how difficult it is to find housing for that particular audience. And then adult children living with their aging parents is also part of this critical issue. So what resources do we already have available? Homeowner basic class, Minnesota, I believe RentWise comes from Minnesota. There's homebuyer education programming, and then lenders do also offer education. They also may offer a mix of lower fees. Looking at this particular problem, we kind of decided this isn't just probably an education one size fits all, where Extension can come in and just do an educational program and help solve this problem. So really looking at it from a community perspective and looking at building community coalitions around this issue, developing materials that lenders can use that are based on research-based information and not just marketing pieces, and then also some policy interventions, working with those coalitions and through local governments. Are there policies that can be drafted or be implemented to help with the affordable housing and cost of living issue?
So critical issues that came up in this group was the idea of really trying to work towards aggregating some data across the country to really inform decision makers and funders at multiple levels the impact that our family resource management work is doing. Another issue was sort of developing some, well, the issue is that many of us have very different reporting systems, and there needs to be some way we can move towards consistently reporting indicators in order to show that impact. So coming up with some way to do that, given our differences. The third bullet really speaks to the notion that each of our states and our systems have different capacity to evaluate, different level of expertise at those institutions. And the notion of maybe by providing some sort of framework, we can assist the system in developing some consistent measures. And some of you know that there's been a few of us that have been working on that for a while, and there is a guide, and if there's some more work that can be done, well, we believe there's more work that can be done to really help states get involved and work towards helping to report. And then, kind of a bigger issue outside of our system is this general sense that family resource management work doesn't make a long-term impact on audiences. And so some folks in this group talked about, is there a way to coordinate across teams or topic areas, even within family resource management, that would help us build capacity to conduct some medium long-term research projects around a topic that then we could report and show positive impact. So what resources do we already have? So there is a current national evaluation initiative and some materials that include logic models, crosswalks, and some sample indicators. That's out there. There is the NEFI evaluation tool. There is the CFPB youth tool, which has 50 some odd questions. We have some states who are evaluating at the CASA level, and actual behavior change levels, but no one is really reporting based on common indicators. So we're getting there, but I think more discussion needs to be had about how to move forward. One of the things that we really feel is an asset is people have experience conducting information who could provide some training for other people. And then some states have some curriculum that's being used by multiple states. And it would be really great if we could kind of figure out who those are and see if there's some common work groups that might be willing to work together across states. Some next steps: try to connect those using the same curriculum to develop strategies to combine evaluation data and report it, sort of like what has been done with the Your Money, Your Goals initiative, or Solid Finances, or the VITA programming. Another next step might be to identify and share best common denominator indicator recommendations. So again, sort of an opportunity for all of us to kind of get together, put our brains together. What could we be doing together? Someone also thought it would be great to set up a time to share what's working, what isn't working, just among our group. And then lastly, someone suggested kind of having a one-pager on recommendations for some of the reporting systems that are in place that states are using, kind of identify some key indicators that could be put into those systems that then make it a little easier to coordinate across the US.
Okay, so we have two more to go through. First one is working with volunteers. So why is this a critical issue? Because our volunteers do need training. Extension professionals are already stretched very thin, and we know this, so having volunteers in our programming is essential, whether that be we're doing a train the trainer or just having them assist with programming. But also when we're working with volunteers, so looking at the affordability of that and sustainability. Finding quality volunteers can sometimes be an issue. Finding those that we can trust, and then having our volunteers that overcommit. So what resources do we already have to help train our volunteers? Because that is really what we're looking at, is how do we get our volunteers trained? How do we get them comfortable in delivering content, and also building relationships with them. So Master Money Mentors from University of Florida Extension has that available. VITA has a training. The National FCS Volunteer Toolkit. There's also Creative Branding through United Way, that's volunteer coordinator, and then Strength Building from Volunteer Hubs and working with Chamber of Commerce. So next steps that this group came up with were creating a network of those who use volunteers currently. What are best practices, how are they doing it, and then keep working together. Again, just kind of reaching out across state lines and figuring out what others are doing, what's working, because working with volunteers in family resource management is probably going to be a little bit different than working with our 4-H or youth development volunteers. And then finally, finding and engaging new audiences. Why is this a critical issue? So finding that correct audience for the content that we're delivering. Answering the so what. Why do we need to engage these audiences? How do we present to a diverse audience and not just the typical extension audience that we typically reach? So how do we find them, and how do we then present to them? How do we find out where they're at currently and going to them versus just expecting people to fill the seats? Diversity and understanding why reaching the new audiences is important. Some professionals may think that we don't need to reach new audiences, but it is important. So really educating ourselves on why it's important. And again, how do we do it? So what resources do we already have? You know, we're very lucky with our network of professionals and being able to immerse themselves in the community and having that knack for finding key personnel within the community that know how to reach out to new audiences. We're able to connect and partner with others throughout the community. That's just something that Extension is really good at. And we've already built community agency partnerships at the local and state levels, and even at the national level. So if you were at these pre-symposium, we did have some of our national partners there that were able to work through some of these with us as well. Next steps, again, this group did not get to any next steps in their discussion. So just something for you all to ponder. So in closing, just wanting to say to get involved. If you're not involved in a multi-state project yet, maybe one of these topic areas is something that you're very passionate or interested in. There are areas that we discussed that you might be an expert in already, we've just been missing that expert in that particular topic area. And if you have resources that you want to share with the rest of the country, it's important to get involved and not just stay in your own little state. Some states are big, but being able to share resources across state lines is really important as well, especially in the area of family resource management, because we are a little bit smaller group than maybe some others. So finding ways to work with each other is really important.